if you can't get that lucky thing to happen to you early on, you really are going to struggle for the rest of your career and your entrepreneurial life, your whole life, really. So what I always tell people is focus on what you can control. Learn everything you can to become an expert in the fields you want. Build what you can with your own two hands. Get a team put together around you, and then you can succeed.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Authors on Mission podcast. So, do you want to build a startup that gives you freedom instead of just chasing millions? Well, what if I told you that one of the most honest voices in entrepreneurship openly admits he's not a millionaire, but feels like one because he's redefined success around freedom rather than wealth? Jason Sherman did exactly that, and he's with us today. Jason has transformed his entrepreneurial expertise into a no-nonsense guide called Strap on Your Boots, and it's opened doors to teaching at UPenn's Wharton School and consulting with emerging startups across the country. So keep listening to find out how Jason's refreshingly honest approach to both business and writing is changing how entrepreneurs think about success, failure, and the courage to share the real stories. Without further ado, Jason, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Danielle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation.
Of course, I'm excited to have you on. I've been looking forward to this conversation because, hey, we all need these kinds of tips in our lives, right?
Yes, for sure. I needed them at one point, right?
Yeah. So yeah, let's dive in a little bit about yourself though before we talk about the book in particular. You were a full-time entrepreneur since 2005. So I'm wondering, was there a pivotal moment when you decided to leave corporate life behind for good, and what led to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's 20 years ago, goes by in a flash, and a lot has happened since then. But the moment when I realized I was not fit for the corporate world, a lot of people probably feel this way, is I wasn't being appreciated for my work at the job that I had. They were basically using me for my skills and then kind of pushing me aside and saying, we don't really need you anymore. So I was actually laid off from my last position. And at the time, I was making more money doing my consulting work than I was at the job. So it was almost like serendipity. It was like, hey, we're gonna let you go with like a severance package and paid vacations and all these things that I got. So now I can go start my business full time. And it really allowed me about a year's worth of time to get it off the ground properly. And I never looked back.
Yeah, hey, I absolutely understand where you're coming from. As somebody who used to work as a teacher, I understand what it's like to make that transition and that shift when you start dabbling at something else like consulting work, and then you know what you need to make that change. So it's really important that we touch upon that. And I'm
Yeah.
assuming, kind of based off of that experience, is where Strap on Your Boots kind of came from and was inspired by. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, and it took a while. I mean, really, it was 15 years. So, well, from 2005 to 2015, it was 10 years of really learning, right? And
Mm.
trying new things and figuring out how to avoid mistakes and succeeding at startups and that sort of thing. And over those 10 years, I really came up with my own strategies, methodologies, and tactics that worked over and over and over again. And then I started finding struggling entrepreneurs who reminded them of myself. So I was like, oh, this is me 10 years ago. And they didn't have anyone to help them. So they were asking me for help because they saw that I was succeeding in some ways. And so I realized I was telling people the same things over and over and over again, which was not conducive to my time. It was really a huge time suck doing the same thing. And that's the trigger and the catalyst to say, oh, I better write it all into a book so I can just hand somebody the book and say, here you go, here's how you'll do it. And that worked really well.
It's really interesting to think about reasons why people write their books, right? I talk to authors all the time, and sometimes it's to build their brand, others just because they have a good idea or want to leave a legacy. But it's interesting to think, yours is just so I don't have to keep doing the same thing over and over. Let me make it easy for myself to have the book out there and just hand it to somebody. But that's a very valid approach,
Yeah.
and you get the added benefits of everything else I mentioned, but then that too.
Yeah, because once I hand them the book and they actually use it and they succeed using it, then they can come back to me and maybe hire me as a consultant to continue to help them, right? And that's what happened a lot of times was I got a lot of clients out of it. I'd give them a free book, they'd read it, they'd call me and say, "Hey, I did some of this stuff, but I need help with this stuff.
Yeah.
Hire me." And that's how a lot of my clients came to be. And I also handed the book out to a lot of college students and master's program students at colleges, and what happened was some PhD students got a hold of it and they realized, oh, we need something like this in the entrepreneurship programs at UPenn and Temple and Drexel and all the other, schools in Philly. And so, and other schools in Jersey, actually Rutgers and Rowan as well. I was doing it at, and they used the book in class. And what they realized was they needed something more like a course or like a workshop. So I literally, with PhD students, created the Startup Essentials workshop, which is based on the book, but it opens it up more hands on, versus like the book is more like, stories, examples, and homework. And the Startup Essentials is more like coursework. Like you have to actually do this hard work. And that's what got me into the colleges to start doing the course.
Right, so it kind of just opened a ton of different doors for you, and it all started with just putting some words down on a page and writing your experience. That's incredible. So to kind of get into the content of the book itself, do you happen to have a copy of it with you today?
I do have some around here somewhere, but I mean, it's in my head. I mean,
Understood.
I literally live and breathe the book every single day.
Understood. Perfect. Well, hey, in that case, I'd like to kind of dive into it. I mean, you start the book by saying you're not a millionaire. So I was important to be so upfront about that rather than just follow the typical success guru playbook.
Yep. Yeah, because growing up and also me being a first time entrepreneur in the late 90s, early 2000s, because I've been an entrepreneur for a very long time, you always see these quote unquote success stories or gurus saying all you have to do is buy 10 apartment buildings and rent them out and you'll become a millionaire, or all you have to do is build a casino software, sell it to a big company and make a lot of money. And it was always these like one time lucky situations they were in where their rich uncle gave them $1 million to start investing in real estate, or they went to Princeton or MIT where they met someone and they worked on software together, and then some big company bought it for $10 million, and then they started getting investments in other businesses. But 99.99% of the world is never going to see that lucky thing happen. It's just not going to happen. And so what I wanted to do was something completely different and disruptive, which is actionable, realistic, duplicate. You can duplicate everything in the book. It has to be replicable, and you don't need money. You don't need connections. You don't need a rich uncle. You don't need to go to an Ivy League college. You just need to be willing to put the work in from the examples I give you in the book and the homework I give you in the book or the course. So I really wanted to attack it to the 99% of the world and not that 1% that might have a rich uncle.
Understood. And I understand that completely. You relate to more people and to a majority of us that, we don't have that rich uncle. We have to make our own way. And I think that's another factor in success of business books like this, or, any nonfiction book really, because nobody wants to hear that everything went perfectly for you, because that's not realistic and that's not what's happening to your readers. They want to hear your failures and the struggles and the process. So I totally get that.
Yeah, and like Rich Dad and Poor Dad. I remember reading that book, and he was an example of the real estate thing. And then you have like the 4 Hour Work Week, and you have Tim Ferriss, and you have a lot of these other people who, again, they built some software early on and were able to succeed and become millionaires. It's If you can't get that lucky thing to happen to you early on, you really are going to struggle for the rest of your career and your entrepreneurial life, your whole life, really. So what I always tell people is focus on what you can control. And whatever you can't control, which means VCs, you can't control school you went to, can't really control that if you can't afford or get the grades to go to Ivy League. What can you control? Learn everything you can to become an expert in the fields you want. Build what you can with your own two hands. Get a team put together around you, and then you can succeed. You can do it. You just got to do it the harder way, right? Which is more work.
Understood. Yeah, and it's all very valid points. And to anybody listening today, I understand, Jason, you have a ton of different resources for people. I mean, you have films out there, you have your own podcast too, and websites. And I'm sure we can all kind of go there too to learn more, in addition to, diving into the book. I'm wondering if you want to kind of let us know where exactly can we go to get more information about that before we dive into the writing process itself.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, if you mentioned my website too, like jasonsherman.org is like a huge wealth of everything I've ever done. It tells you my whole story too. It'll give you links to all my, my movies, my book, my course, my podcast, my AI business. Really, that's what I do full time today is running Vengo AI, the AI agent business, which I use my book, ironically, to build this business. And even today and every day that goes by, I use the methodologies in my book to run my business, my AI company, because I implement all of the data-driven decision making that's in the book, all of the validating of the concepts, to reaching out to customers, scaling the business. It's all in the book. I follow it myself. So it's insane to think that me, the guy who wrote the book, also follows everything in the book, but that's why it's there. It works. I'm still doing it 20 years later.
Exactly. Yeah. So there you go, everybody. Check out the book, learn how to do it, and you can always reach out to Jason for more questions and ideas too. We're going to put links to all this in the description box of the podcast today, also, so you can go ahead and click right over, everybody. But yeah, I mean, we are the Authors on Mission podcast, so we love to hear more about writing tips and tips, whatever it was that helped you get these words out on paper in such an authentic way and so realistic. So you mentioned you spent just an hour a day writing over the course of 6 weeks. So, how did you maintain that while also juggling so many different businesses and tasks?
Yeah, that's a good question because this book was very different than the other, say, like the science fiction book I wrote in 2005 or, the true story book I co-wrote with a doctor in 2008. It's very different because it was more about the actionable steps I was taking on a daily basis for my startups. So it was, and I was, like I mentioned, I was helping so many entrepreneurs on a daily basis. I was kind of already coming up with my own outline and PowerPoint presentations and documents that I was sending to people. So I already had like this beginning stage to a book, right? I already had like the format and the layout and the outline. So what I did for this particular book, and this is 2015, 2016 era, so it was like right around those 2 years. I had just finished working on one of my films, The King's Highway. It was a documentary, and I just finished it. And when I finished it, it was this huge relief, but also a huge gap in time, meaning I was just kind of sitting around, like taking a break and like, what do I do now? And because that's kind of how my brain works, is I have to always be working on at least one creative project. Like right now, I'm working on a NASA documentary while we talk. Insane, right? So,
Yeah.
while I'm running an AI business. So, and I just wrote a sci-fi screenplay last year that placed 3 finalists in 3 contests. So the reason I'm telling you all this is because you shouldn't put so much emphasis on what you're writing in terms of like, oh my God, I have to write today. I have to write tomorrow. I have to focus on this. I have to get this done. The pressure and the stress is going to kill you. A blank page is torture. So what I did instead is, for the first time ever, and iPhones and Siri were just getting really good at that time, I went for walks every day. I went to the park. I literally drove to the park with my dog, and I would just talk to my phone into iNotes using Siri. And I would just get all of the stuff out of my head that I would tell these entrepreneurs in person or on the phone or in a Zoom. I was literally just word vomiting out into iNotes. And when I would get home, I would find this crazy amount of text in the notes. I'd copy paste into a Google Doc, and then I would start fine tuning, refining, changing, editing, adding, subtracting, and really fixing it. I did this chapter by chapter. And because I did it in this way, I was able to get it done very quickly. So now when I have to write anything, I do the same thing. I just talk to Siri into an iNote, or even just a voice note, and then transcribe it later. And then I just fix it that way, because typing at the desk is really, to me, it's too pressurized and kind of claustrophobic.
Yeah, well, first off, I just have to make a comment about the fact that you really are dabbling in every single industry out there, from film to app development to writing. I mean, it's crazy. It seems so unrelated, but when you think about it, I can see how it's not, because it all kind of builds upon just the idea of growth and consistently adding more tasks. And that's the only way we move along in this world, rather than just staying stagnant and watching Netflix all day, right?
Bingo. It's
Yeah.
exactly right. I would go
Right.
crazy if I didn't have all these things going on.
Hey, believe me, same way for me. I'm teaching full time. I'm ghostwriting, editing, podcasting it, and I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah, moving into more of what you were talking about regarding, time management and everything. I think it's really cool that you do use that note-taking app, and that's an amazing tip for anybody listening today too. We don't all have time to sit down at that computer. It's when you're in the car, you can transcribe a couple of
Talk.
chapters, cooking, working out, whatever it might be, in the
Yeah.
shower, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever works. I love it.
Talking and getting it out of your head is just the best way to do it.
Totally. So, just another question I had about the book itself, but you really do include real documents, investor Q&As. It's pretty detailed and personal materials. So what
Yeah.
was the thought process behind that?
Again, the books I read in the past were very general and generic, and like they didn't
Mhm.
really have a lot of detail. It was more like, well, I had this meeting with an investor and I blew him away, and because of that, he invested $10 million in my business. What did you do in that meeting? What questions did the investor ask you? How did you answer them? Help us get the same result that you got. But nobody does that. Nobody tells you how. They always hide the secret sauce. So again, part of what I wanted to do was really lay it all out for people and say, look, this is exactly what I went through. No holds barred. I'm not hiding anything, so that you know exactly what I did to raise, my first $150,000 for my one app. This is how I got 500,000 users for that app. This is how I was trying to raise another $1 million and why I wasn't able to. Here's why. Here are the reasons. Here's what you can do to avoid what happened. Go into this industry, or don't talk to these types of investors, or have these answers ready to go. This pitch deck, here you go. Here's how it has to look. So I really tried to make sure that the answers that people are going to want to get from me were answered in the book, right? Because the questions that I get from people all the time, like I mentioned, here's the book, read it, and you'll have all your answers.
Yeah, there you go. And it kind of ties back to that idea then, right? Really being relatable and having the book just to get the information out there, and, of course, the benefits as well. So amazing stuff. But Jason, I also want to spend a little bit of time talking, some more about these other investments that you're involved in. I mean, the app itself, you said, was such a huge thing you're working on right now. Can you share with us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it really is pretty amazing. Out of all the platforms I've ever built, this one seems to be succeeding the most because it is AI. And most business owners have a website, but they have no way of talking to customers on the website. It's either an FAQ or a contact form. So we offer this AI agent that is automatically trained based on their website, so they don't have to do the training. The AI agent sits on their website, people can talk to it, and then the name, email, phone number, and conversation summary of what they wanted or needed goes right to the business owner, and they can close a deal immediately. So this works for like service-based businesses, products, coaches, anybody who has a service or a product. And what we're finding is, instead of the industry average of 2 to 5% of leads being converted on websites, which is very low, we're getting 77% lead conversion on any website that has our AI agent. This means you're getting 77% more sales. It's working amazingly well, and we're now venturing into the university realm. They want to start using our technology for admissions counseling and onboarding new students, alumni, campus security, safety, that kind of thing, everything. So we're starting to do that now.
Understood. So I think it's really cool that you have that. I can imagine, different business owners taking the data from whatever the AI bot talked about with that client, and then using that to just generate, follow-up lead emails and also client profiles. And also, of course, I'm sure you're getting feedback regarding the system too, based on those conversations.
100%.
Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. As somebody who hates talking to the robots when I just want to talk to a person, and it's telling me to press one for this department, press two for this department. I'm wondering if you've ever thought about those kind of concerns, or if that's something that pops up a bit.
Yeah, as someone who also hates that, we made sure that we built it around the opposite of that. So it's very human-like. There is no
Mhm.
press one for anything. You can't really tell that it's an AI. It's very personal and it acts and talks like you. So let's say you built one for your car rental business. It's going to actually talk the way that you do and answer all the questions that you typically answer on a regular basis. Why would you answer those thousand questions over and over again when the AI can look like you, sound like you, and talk like you? And then when it's time to make the deal, that's when it goes to you at that final moment. So you're not spending the 90% of time doing those questions and answers. You're just finalizing and closing the deal at the end. And that's how it works. We let the human take control of the sale and let the AI take care of this of closing the deal up to the sale.
Understood. Okay. So, hey, I like that you've put that into consideration, and I totally get what that probably, comes out as being. I've worked and used AI in the past, and it can sound like a human to the extent that sometimes it's hard to distinguish these days.
Yes, it
So,
is.
amazing stuff. But yeah, let's transition a little bit. And I know we are an authors podcast, but I am really curious about the NASA documentary. How did that
NASA.
start up?
I mean, so it just so happens that all the movies I've made, I always uncover the story in my neighborhood. So when I was living in Philadelphia, The King's Highway and Cutting Corners, my two documentaries, I just discovered this ridiculous amount of history that was not known. People didn't know it. So I made these two documentaries and it just blew up. The NASA documentary just so happens where I live now in the suburbs, right behind my house. The Apollo, Mercury, and Gemini astronauts in NASA trained at the world's largest, most powerful centrifuge right around the corner from my house, and nobody knows. Nobody really knows. I didn't know this, and I live right around the corner. And this massive base called the NADC right behind me used to be a naval base, is where they built all the planes for the World War II. And they were doing a lot of Navy research and astronaut aerospace research. They built the first satellites ever deployed in the space. One of the canisters that saved the Apollo 13 mission was built around the corner from me. So like all these stories were just kind of like, whoa, this is really right here in my hometown. I got to write the story. So before the Moon is the name of the movie because this all happened before we got to the moon, which is really cool because not many people talk about that. They talk about after. So it's beforethemoonfilm.com. We're right in the middle of production. I just started interviewing NASA engineers, astronauts, and flight directors and historians. I'm in the middle of interviewing them all, and hopefully by the summer of 2026, the film will be done, and I can release it into the theaters and film festivals. Uh, but you're right; it all goes together. And the reason I say that is because A, I have to write the story. B, I have to
Yeah.
make a website. That's technology. C, I have to do video. Social media is video and content is video. A movie is video. I have to do trailers. I have to do social media content. I have social accounts for all of, TikToks and Facebooks and Instagrams and YouTubes for the movie. And if you look, I'm posting a lot of NASA footage. That's social media marketing. That's startup 101. I'm writing blog posts. That's startup 101. So if you look at what I'm doing for Before the Moon, it's no different than what I'm doing for Vengo AI. As a matter of fact, I'd argue I'm doing the same exact thing for both. The only difference is Vengo AI is an AI service and Before the Moon is a documentary. That's the only difference. But besides those two differences, I'm doing the same work for both of them.
Understood. Yeah, I like how you kind of brought it back to that, right? Because it's eye-opening to think about how these seemingly unrelated things that you're doing. I actually was like kind of laughing along when you first mentioned that, the app, the documentary, but it's all interconnected. It's like a
It
little
is.
spider web of all of your skills. So,
It
all
absolutely
right.
is.
Mhm. It's a great thing for all the listeners to learn about. You might be an author, but that lends itself to so many other things. There's never such thing as just an author. So really
That's
cool thing to
true.
think about.
And you know
Mhm.
what? Don't forget one thing too that you keep
Mhm.
mentioning you might be an author, but you might be able to write the best book in the world. But if you can't market it, no one's going to read it.
It's true.
You need to know how to market your book, especially nowadays. It's even harder now. People aren't really buying a lot of paperback, right? So you need to be able to get that book out there, get as many followers on socials, start posting little blurbs and videos, and make some AI generated images of maybe the storyboard of your book so people can kind of see, Do a reenactment of like a scene in your book. Get people excited about it. Get people excited about it, because if you're an author, it's hard to sell a book unless you can get it out there.
Definitely. And a lot of people think, that the process is done as soon as you get it published and the book's on the shelf, but it's not. It's always ongoing, even years down the road. You need to keep breathing life into it. So that's an amazing tip right there. And speaking of amazing tips, as we begin to draw to the end of our conversation here, what other tips and tricks do you think are most valuable for the authors listening today to take home with them? Any last minute bits of advice that you'd like to offer?
I just gave someone advice this weekend. She is an older person who wants to write a book about Eastern medicine and holistic medicine, and I thought it was a great topic. And she said she wanted to use AI, and I said, "Well, here's my advice." So everyone listening, you're gonna get the same advice I just gave somebody else, one of my friends. Don't use AI to write your book. Please do not do that. It's just not the right move. Yes, it's going to be fast and easy to do, but it's not ethical. And it's also not going to come out with your voice. Do use AI to help you write an outline. Do use AI to help you find resources and sources for your book, research for your book. That's all fine as long as you double check, make sure all that stuff is accurate and fact checked. And lastly, you can give AI one of your chapters and ask for strengths and weaknesses, flaws, things that might be able to get fine tuned, but don't let it make the changes for you. Just let it give you, as a book editor would, your advice, their advice. And if you use AI in this way, you'll be ethically writing with your own voice, and you'll have a writing partner kind of to help you do that.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, definitely. These days, as an editor, I see AI manuscripts coming in all the time. People don't even realize how obvious it is. They say, "This is my book that I wrote," and then I come back to them when I'm creating their proposal, back to them like, "So this is AI generated, and would you
Yes.
like to help me humanize it?" It's actually a new service that I've been offering is humanization services, kind of taking those people's AI generated chapters and getting rid of all those M dashes and those repeated use of
Terrible.
delve and yeah. So that's an incredible tip. So yeah, everyone do the work, use AI
Yeah.
for maybe idea generation, outlining, but you got to
Write
humanize
the
it
book
these days.
yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. I love it. Jason, this has been an incredible conversation. You're a lot of fun to talk to, and you just have insights about everything out there. So
I
it's been a
appreciate
lot
it.
of fun.
It
Of
has been.
course. So yeah, everybody, again, we're gonna put all of Jason's links in the description box of this podcast today. Go ahead and check it on out, and go ahead and also check out Strap On Your Boots because it's a piece of advice that everybody should know these days, something we can all learn from. So yeah, Jason, thank you so much for being a part of our episode. It's been a lot of fun.
My pleasure, Danielle.
Of course, and to the listeners, if this conversation sparked your author journey, just remember, get out there, put your words on the paper, keep writing, keep leading, keep inspiring, because the world needs your authentic story. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast, everyone.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.